In this lesson, we'll learn how to create a shape from objects that are being sliced through in plan. Now, if you'll remember from the last lesson, we mentioned that the plan is being cut through roughly at about 1 meter above the ground surface. So what we're going to do to represent that slice is to create a section object. So the section object can be found underneath the Create tab. Go across to Shapes and then just click on Section. Now you'll notice with the section that you basically click where you want it and then you'll just drag outwards, and you can make it as big as you want, even though it's going to be infinite in terms of its extents. You can also choose to have it only work on the section boundary. In other words, if you only want to take a section of a smaller object, you could go and create a small section object and just place it around a particular object itself. We're going to work with infinite because it's just a lot easier. And what you'll immediately see once you create that section object is that all of the lines in yellow are the ones that are being cut through, and that yellow line essentially is the new object that is being derived from the object being sliced through. So let's look in our front view, and I'm going to now move this sectional object roughly to the floor height. So I'm going to do this, as I mentioned, roughly just because it's more or less not going to make a difference if it's a millimeter above or below. And I'm now going to move it up in the Y value by roughly a meter. So that is the height that a plan traditionally is being cut through, and we can see now if we zoom in that there's going to be a little yellow section line where all of these pavilions are being cut. And you'll also see that there is going to be an equal section line where this central tower is being cut as well. So we can now take this shape and we can basically extract a shape out of it. So you'll see the similar Create Shape button is here as well, just as the one that we had clicked when we selected edges within the previous object in the previous lesson. So I'm going to now create a shape. Just make sure that the correct layer is on. So ground floor is the selected layer, and you can also choose the color if you want to change that. So I'm going to click on Create Shape. This one is going to be called Pavilions. We can actually just call it Plan, and we'll change all of that in CAD anyway. So you can now select that object then, and if you want to do anything to it, you can hide it, change it, and modify it. I'm going to move on straight away and then work on this little pavilion, and exactly the same thing is going to happen. We're going to go in our view, we're going to select that object that is being, that section object that is slicing everything, and I'm going to move it up into a different height so that I can basically cut through this pavilion, the entrance pavilion itself. So I'm going to move it up slightly to about there until I can see it clearly cutting through this building, and I'm now going to isolate out that building, and I'm going to change the extents, and I'm going to basically make it smaller, and I'm going to just move it to where that building is. Therefore, I'm only going to be making a section of this particular building. You could have also just refreshed and left it on infinite. It would have pretty much done the same thing, but I'm just doing it the longer and more proper way. So same thing here, you can extract that shape and we can call this entrance pavilion, and we can click on OK. So the next item that I would like to cut through is this building itself. So with the actual context, we want to somehow represent it, but we don't necessarily want to cut through any particular height. I would like to also show the difference in height between all these levels. So what I'm going to do here is to select the 2 or 3 or 4 polys that make up this surface. I'm going to control click the edge, and then I'm just going to deselect some of the edges that I don't necessarily want. For example, this edge over here I'm going to have to remove manually because it's actually a continuation of this long edge, but I do want to keep all of these edges, even this one where there is a change in angle of the ground, that you want to keep and represent as well. So all those edges as well, once they are selected, you can scroll down and create shape out of that as well. This we'll find just here, and we'll click on OK. If you want to create a shape out of the building as well, you can do so. We can also go and select the border of the bottom of the building, and we can create a shape of that too. So let's create a shape there. And all of these shapes are now going to automatically be on that new layer. The last object is going to be this ceiling platform here. I'm going to go and do the same thing, select the border, and you'll see that a lot of this is quite repetitious, but different objects are going to require a slightly different method. So with all of that done, let's now go and select this ground floor layer. We highlight it, isolate it, and let's just have a look at everything that we have. You can now see that the building here we have as a separate layer. This we can already understand that this is going to be where the balustrade is. These squares are cutting through the structure underneath, so we don't need to be too worried about all of that geometry because we're not going to show it in the plan. Then over here we can see the first tread. Now one thing that's missing is we want to represent in our plan that the steps that are below that. We don't just want to cut through one step and forget about what's happening there. So let's now go to those stairs and see how we can extract everything that is happening below. I'm going to select these stairs, and I'm also going to attempt at selecting the stair object, which is actually happening here, if I just get it right. And I'm just going to very delicately move in here and select that stair object, isolate that out, and I'm going to have a look at which stairs I need to extract a shape from in order to get that done. So you can see here that that stair is over here, so that one I already have, so I need to basically now select all of these steps below and control click the edge and create a shape out of that as well. There we go. So now if I select all of the objects on that layer and isolate them, you can see that you have all of the other steps as well, even though at the moment it's all still in 3D, but that we're going to sort out later on in AutoCAD. So I think we're pretty much ready. One of the things I do want to mention, when you look in plan, you'll start seeing that the more objects you start extracting shapes from, the more complex it's going to be. Now, if you know your building really well, this is fine, but if it starts becoming too difficult to handle, you may want to look at actually changing the layers of each of the objects as you start extracting them. So for example, if I was extracting all of the floor slabs, I would want to put it on a floor slab layer, and then all of the structure, for example, the steel and the wood, you could put that on a different layer completely. So that basically you start to separate out and organize your CAD layers that you will then use. Also, one thing I would like to have a look at here is you can also go backwards and forwards to just see that everything is in its correct place. For example, you would want to just make sure that all of the edges are there. Make sure that you know which of the edges is at the top and the bottom. In other words, is the canopy bigger than the base, or is the base bigger than the canopy? The last thing you want to do is make a mess of that and basically draw this as being the ground floor and this as being the canopy. So just get to know your building, and then you'll be able to handle the process quite easily in AutoCAD once you pull that information across. So I think we're pretty much ready. The last thing we're going to do in this lesson is just extract out all of these shapes that we've done. So we basically are going to reselect all of this, and we can now go and export this, and we can basically export selected, and we can choose to export this as a DWG. And we can now go into our project files, and we're going to go and create an AutoCAD file. And I'm just going to go into the referenced file folder, and I'm going to create a 04 because it's, or let's say 05 because it's less than 5. And I'm just going to say extracted plans. And I'm going to save that. And I'm going to just leave it by the default. 2000 is fine. And then in the next lesson, we're going to open up AutoCAD, and we're going to have a look at what we can do with all of that exported geometry. So that's the end of this lesson. What we've basically covered, just to recap in the last two lessons, is the process of extracting out shapes and splines out of polys or meshes or any other 3D object by using the create shape command or tool. And we've also looked at using the section tool so that we can cut through an object and extract the shape out of what is being cut through. So once you get a handle of all of that, we can now jump into AutoCAD and we can start to organize that ground floor plan.